One thing I've been thinking about as I drink my coffee is that I don't like being shamed. I don't like people who tell me you should be ashamed. I don't believe in that. I'm not ashamed of anything of my family, my history, because I know shame is a powerful tool. That doesn't mean I'm shameless. It just means that you're not going to use it as a weapon against me. I see how fragile some women are to criticism. I see how some men who made mistakes get blackmailed into doing things that they shouldn't do because they feel a deep sense of shame. Accountability and taking responsibility for your actions isn't being shameless. It's acknowledging that yes, it happened. You move on, you press on. I think people get into a mental psychosis when they start hiding everything, taking an eraser. They just hide so much. Why do they always want to hide? Hide in a hole. Even a snake comes out of its hole. You ever seen the animals like the moles? The hairless ones? Animals that live in holes and never venture out. Never take any chances. That hide in the dirt. Don't look very nice. Think of a worm. Worm doesn't come out that much, does it? It's pretty vulnerable. Hides in the soil from the birds. At least a reptile ventures out. A centipede ventures out, climbs up, right? So for me personally, you can warn people while also not wallowing and being paralyzed by shame and stuff like that. I think that shame has been overused in a way. I noticed when I've been watching a lot of these testimonials from drug addicts that came from Utah, they felt a deep sense of shame that led them into a deeper sense of drug addiction where they felt like they could never recover. And so for me, I thought, if only they would have just said, you know what, I screwed up. I did this. You know what, I'm over it. I'm going to go on forward. So know what you know and do what you do. They would have been much better. Also with my mother, part of her reason why she has so much mental illness is because how people throw her past in her face a lot as a tool. And I kind of would listen to my mom and watch how people would talk to her. And this is not to be confused with the positivity movement that says, no limits. No, that's not what I mean. That's transgressing. So what I mean to say is that you can acknowledge something without reveling in it, and that you can embrace something without clinging to it and letting it choke you out. That if you have a sense of self where if someone throws something you did in the past in your face and you don't flinch, you don't blink, that is a strength of armor. You grow a thicker skin. It's harder for people to psychologically manipulate you, bring you down, and put you with a boot on the back of your neck. Again, I find this very strange from an outsider's opinion. Don't tell your family, don't talk about that. Meanwhile, all around you is decay. I find this very strange. It's basically like telling people, sit in your place, be quiet, and watch the enemy front lines move closer until they take someone you love. And then you'll complain, why wasn't I told? Why did this happen to me? It's just very odd. Shame is important. But if you were to whip me naked through the street, I would still come out strong from it. I wouldn't hide in my hole and never venture out again. I would still walk to the store. I know that there's a lot of humiliation rituals that people do to each other as a weapon. And that cripples people because they did something stupid and now their opponents have used it as a tool. It is an extremely common tactic where people will get you to do something humiliating, which is pretty dumb, that you shouldn't have done, and then they use it as a sense to control you and harness you. But if you let the cat out of the bag, you deal with the scratches that come, you'll be better off than wallowing in shame. It doesn't mean you don't have a sense of regret and that you don't reform. It just means that you don't put a ball and chain on you that sinks you to the bottom of the ocean, that drowns you in the swarm of vapid opinions. There's a mode where you push people to change, and there's right ways to do it. That's true. But if someone wants to be potent in the way they force change, that doesn't involve having shame and, hiding or leaving it up to someone else. You shouldn't try to muzzle them. It's like if someone's been divorced twice, you don't use it as a tool. If someone has, I don't know, they failed some businesses, right? You don't overly weaponize elements of shame in order to one-up people and feel superior about yourself. What bothers me is people who hide their mistakes while shaming people who don't. I'm not saying you flout it or that you encourage it. What I'm saying is that you use it as a shield to guard others from the perils of stupidity and ignorance. Because as your opponent reveals and encourages, you hide because of shame. Shame can weaken you and weaken your movement and weaken your potency, weaken your effectiveness, soften you, make you as useless as a worm because you've been crippled by flapping mouths. If you made mistakes, you own up to it and you press forward. And if someone throws it in your face, you simply let it rub off your shoulders like water on feathers ducks. Right? You neither put it in a cup to gather it, but you neither let it saturate you. It rolls off. I would say more people need to understand that. It bothers me people who hide their shame, who pretend to be better than what they are, who always show one overly filtered perspective of their personality, who always keep their mouth shut, think that everyone else has to do that everyone else has to just, put a zipper on their mouth and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna focus on myself and let the world go by. Some people are meant to be rocks. Others are meant to just go with the flow. And who are you to remove the rocks from the river? Because the rocks in the river, when somebody falls out of their boat, are going to grab onto those rocks for safety. Your path and current are not going to be the same as the rocks. No, the rocks disturb the current. You don't have a right to go and pick out the rocks from the river. You don't have a right to remove the shell from the hermit crab. You don't get to decide. You don't. You don't get to disarm people of their tools because you don't have any tools, or you're unable to form your own tools, or to utilize any tools, or to recognize any tools. I find this strange. it's easy to sit in a chair and act like no one else can have an opinion that might have some parallel meanings to yours, and that you should recognize the merit and truth nugget within it, right? That's why discussions have to be had. Deep reflections. But to hear something once and to then just act like, you know what, because there's an element of shame in this, you cannot speak on it. Doesn't make sense to me. Because the number one thing the youth ask you is, how do you know my experience? How do you know? You don't know what it's like, and then you tell them, I do know what it's like, and you tell them, and they say, wow. They feel much better, they trust you more. But if you have your nose in the air, or your gaze is always down, and your back is always slouched, and your belly's always pudgy, why do you get to mock at the ones whose shoulders are firm and backs are scarred and chests are elevated in a way filled with air and force? I don't understand this. I don't understand. I'm confused by weak people. I'm confused by people who care more about their personal reputation than helping others. I'm confused about people who think their way is the only way to help people, and just because they wouldn't do it your way means that it cannot have any benefit in the entire freaking planet. I find this very interesting. But I'm thinking about it. What do you think? What role does shame play in society? Now, in the Amish culture, they have the cold shoulder where they will talk for a while. Then there was the Catholic way of shame. There's lots of different modes of shame, historically and psychologically. So I want to know what you think, because you don't want to transgress limits, but you also have to tell it like it is. So what do you think? You know? I've been thinking about this. Been thinking about it. What do you think?